Josh here from Chicken Fox Productions with another episode of Memories of Us podcast. This week, Tony introduces Beth Erlander, an art therapist, professional counselor, and eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, practitioner.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Memories of Us. Today, we have Beth Erlander. She is a grief support practitioner, registered art therapist, licensed professional counselor in the state of Colorado. She is also an unofficial nurse or CNA to a partner with quadriplegia. How you doing today, Beth?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing well.
Good.
So with that introduction, it just, a lot of people, when we talk about grief, we often think of grief in ways of losing a loved one.
Yep.
But the things that we don't talk about, like when you don't lose a loved one, in your case, and your significant other or your partner is left with a disability, and that's kind of where this kind of takes shape, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very unique kind of loss, and it was really confusing in the beginning, and we're going into 9 years, so we're a little used to it by now, but in the beginning, I didn't really fit anywhere in the grief world, because I remember distinctly trying to find a grief support group for myself, and I would go to a few events that were grief related, and even in the books I was reading, all of it was with the language of death loss. And I would mutter under my breath, like, and other life losses. And it was confusing because everything that we knew in regards to our relationship and our life that we had together as two able-bodied people totally was flipped and turned upside down. And I remember having so much grief. And so there were so many losses, and I didn't fit in the grief world because he was still alive, but in a very, very different form. So It took a while for me to adjust to that.
Now, walk us up to those moments to where your life kind of changed.
Sure. Well, at the time, it was 2012. It was summer. It was a beautiful day. I was actually at home cooking a surprise dinner for him, and he had let me know that he was out riding his bike, his mountain bike, and he didn't come home, which was very strange, and he didn't let me know. Usually sends a text if he's going to be late or gives a call, and that didn't happen. So I knew something was wrong, and I eventually got the search and rescue party crew up the hill. And that's, it was a very strange time because I knew something was wrong, but I didn't quite know what. There's a lot more I could say. I'm in the middle of writing my memoir about this whole process of how life went upside down and how we both had immense changes. And my memoir is about me coming right side up and dealing with this loss and staying with him, because one of the things I learned shortly after that, when I did find some other partners of quads to connect to, but that was a challenge in itself. But one of them said to me that 75% of partnerships or marriages don't last once quadriplegia or disability like that or paraplegia enters the picture. So I chose to stay, and it's still very much a challenge, and I feel like I live with grief every day because Michael, my partner, has a visible loss, and that makes me think of one of my mentors that I found with grief, Sabam Fusome, who is from West Africa. She actually died in 2017, but I learned a lot from her, and she would teach and do a lot of grief rituals, and she taught Westerners how to grieve. And so she has her list of categories of grief, and one of them was visible loss, where it's obvious. Michael's in a power wheelchair, so you can't ignore the fact that he's lost a lot of his abilities. as an able-bodied person. So we live with it every day.
Now that is really different. Yeah, I'm sorry, sorry for your loss, but it looks like you're handling it pretty good. Now, Michael, his accident, he was hit by a car. Yes.
He was up mountain biking on his
Okay.
favorite trail outside of Lyons, Colorado.
Okay. Man, those are some beautiful trails up there.
Yes.
But it's real easy. I walked up there one time. I think I got maybe about 3 miles up and turned back around because I looked across the side and all I could see was the trees going down.
Right.
And I thought to myself, like, yeah, no, even though I'm walking, I don't want to be up here anymore. So I walked my little happy butt on back down. It's man, wow. So how did his accident happen? Did he fall?
Well, it was around dusk, and he actually had the thought of like, oh, it's getting dark, I should get off my bike and walk. But he didn't. And then he hit, it was only like a 5-inch protrusion of a rock that it was like it jutted up in the trail. I've been up there since then and saw where he fell. And then the slab of rock was like 6 or 8 feet. It was a big rock that he hit. It was on the trail, so it was flat, but there was that 5-inch ledge he didn't see, or protrusion. So his wheel hit it, and then his bike went up and over, and he was like holding on. And so what he did is he hyperextended his neck. He bent it forward, and then he landed on the rock and couldn't move.
Wow. Now, the changes with the work that you're doing now, explain a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, at the time of the accident, I was actually trying to build my practice in Boulder as a family and child psychotherapist. I am an art therapist. That's my training in psychotherapy. And I'm also an artist. And I had also been doing some play therapy. I'd gotten some training with Lisa Dion of the Synergistic Play Therapy Institute in Colorado. Anyway, great training. Loved working with kids, and was trying to market that and market myself as that. And I also had a private practice in Denver at the time, so I was very busy. When our loss happened, when the accident happened, I really had to slow everything down, even though I managed to still work, which looking back, I'm like, how the hell did I do that? I think it was just a good distraction for me to get out of the trauma. I call it the trauma drama.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have to let go eventually of working with children. I just realized that wasn't my niche, and it wasn't happening. I didn't want to force it. And because of this accident, I was like, well, I feel like I have more that I can add from my personal experience. I even had a little voice inside my head that was my own voice say to me, pay attention to all this, Beth. It's going to come in handy someday. And so that was like my business entrepreneur, healer, inner superpower woman that was just like, you're going to help other people if you pay attention to this. Like, you got to get through your own stuff first. But so that's when I pivoted from like being an artist, play therapist person to I'm going to do grief, loss, and trauma recovery, or reconciliation rather. Yeah.
Okay. Now, finding, I know a little bit about those challenges, trying to find groups that you feel that you can belong to,
Right.
Especially being a man and going through some of those things. And my God, I was just trying to imagine if I had a spouse, what would I, and it's an honest question. Would I be able to stay, or vice versa? Right. And we deep down inside, we want everybody to stay with us, but that is like a hard question. That is a real hard question. And it's sad that it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
And so now, what are some of the tools that you gathered as you were going through this new way of life?
I think one of the things that helped me immensely was that I had a very strong sense of community in the beginning. Both Michael and I were connected to a dance community called the Contact Improvisation Community in Boulder, Colorado. So I had a lot of support. I had support from my own family. My parents drove up immediately. They were there by 8 a.m. I called them at 6 and said, Michael is in the hospital. So they came on up. His family, his parents were both alive at the time. Recently, a few years ago, he lost his mom. But so his mom and dad came out, and his sister and her husband came out. So I wasn't alone, and that was key. And what else was helpful? I think it was helpful that I was working, because I left the hospital and would go and serve others and kind of connect into another part of me. And I found that really helpful. In fact, one of my mentors and dear friends, Annie Brooke, said, you need to get out of the hospital, go. She kicked me out, because I was there from the 2 a.m. until I think I left around 9 or 10. She was like, go home and try and take a nap, or at least take a shower. So I took her advice.
Yeah.
And I left. I didn't sleep, but I, took a break. And so I think also I took care of myself also, because I think I had this awareness, this is, eventually I had this realization that this is a marathon we're running. And so I need pit stops along the way.
Yeah.
Otherwise I'm going to burn out. And then eventually I found things. I started reading about grief. I wanted to know what this was. And so I was voracious with, reading everything I could about grief and things. When I think I was trying to find a place that spoke to me. And I found a few things, but like I said in the beginning, it was mostly through the lens of death loss. So that was interesting. And then I think there were two big things that I did for myself that were so helpful. One was I found grief ritual with Sabamfu Somé. So I did 4 of those over a period of, I think, 3 or 4 years. And 2 of those were done with Sabamfu herself. And that was just, I think that really helped me, because the way that those, it's a place where you can just bring all of your emotion.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter. The one that was really impactful was the one that I did at Brighton Bush Hot Springs with Sabamfu herself. So that's in Oregon.
Okay.
It was recently lost in the fire, but they're rebuilding the fire that this was last year in the summer.
Okay.
But anyway, so they're rebuilding Brighton Bush. But anyway, so I'll never forget when we gathered in this big room with 60 people. And I'm thinking, because I did another grief ritual prior to this one in the style that she does. And I thought, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this with 60 people and 60 people's grief in the room doing ritual? And we did it, and,
wow.
It was a 3-day event, and it started Friday night with introductions around, who are you and what is your loss? And I think one of the things that, she would speak about was, because somebody would ask this question, or they would minimize their loss. Oh my gosh, why am I here when, your loss is so much bigger? And oh my God, Beth, your loss is so much bigger. And blah, blah, blah. And she would just say grief is grief. It's all a matter of your own perspective and how you understand it. We all carry it. It's all in the same category, even though it's different. But she's like, you Westerners like to well, this one is bigger than that one. And this is, she's just put it straight, grief is grief.
Grief is grief, and there's no set way. There's no one grief bigger than the next. And I'm learning that as I'm going, just like yourself. And wanting to learn more about it. I was going, why is this so complicated?
Right. Right.
Why is this so complicated? And then as you dive deeper into it, from a different perspective, I mean, that sort of grief is something that doesn't go away.
Right.
'Cause
No.
you're actively, still developing, and you're still learning, about this new world. Well, not so new anymore, but I think in the same case, there's similarities. Everything is different. Even though it may be someone who has lost all functions, someone who may be in a hospital that is brain dead with the family,
Yep.
like all of these things, I think has these similarities across the board.
Yep.
And everything. So, what were some of the challenges going through it?
Well, let me answer. I didn't quite answer your other question. I got distracted with doing grief ritual. So I did those two things. Like there was grief ritual with Sabonfu, and then I walked part of the Camino in France and Spain.
Really?
Yeah.
Now that is cool.
Yeah.
I've only seen pictures of it, but so how was that?
That was an amazing trip. So a friend of mine was running she was calling it like a walking pilgrimage, and she forwarded it to me, and I was like, oh, I have to do this. So I fundraised actually to be able to do that, because it's not a cheap trip,
right,
to get over there and to sign up and do that. And but it was, for 10 days, I think with one break in the middle, we walked all day long. And I walked with the intention or this mantra inside around, how do I love our life? How do I love quadriplegia? How do I, and how do I accept this? And I just needed to be with that question and be moving my body. So that's when I started, really loving the process of the bilateral stimulation of the footsteps, while processing everything that was happening in our life and the accident and what we'd been through, as well as being in part of the walk. You walk up and over the Pyrenees, from France over into Spain. I mean, it's just beautiful, and the setting is beautiful. So I just, another big resource for me is nature and being outside and being with the elements. So yeah, there's a lot more I could say. And again, I'm writing about that in my memoir, but it's those two big things that really helped me deal with this.
I think nature has a way of healing us.
Yeah.
And I remember taking long walks with my shoes off and going and putting my feet in the dirt and just sitting by a tree for a very long time. And just trying to understand, I don't know, for everybody's different, as we all know. I think just like yourself, sometimes these opportunities present themselves and show us a different way of healing.
Mm-hmm.
And community is one. Now, what is that community like? Because what I mean by that, because when you have men, right? Say, for instance, when we experience different sorts of grief, say, sort of suicide, it's like they go and find their community that they can relate to the most.
Yeah.
So what's your community like now?
My community is a lot smaller, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So if I'm thinking of all your listeners, like if you're new to grief, one thing that's really upsetting is that your community changes. Like somebody said to me once, grief rearranges your address book or your contact list. Some people can't handle it. Some people don't know how to be with grief. And so, because they can't just sit and be with me in my discomfort, they go away or they don't show up. And then the weird thing about it too is that some people that weren't very close came closer at the time. But at this point in time, and I think also because of COVID and quarantining and isolating, like our community has gotten really small. which still, it was already small. So, it was interesting when the pandemic first started. Both Michael and I were like, well, this isn't any different than the way our life was already going, because we didn't have a lot of people coming around. We're still connected to our families, of course, and a few good friends, but our community got really, really small. And I think that's also just, I don't know, I wonder if it's also just part of having a disability. So.
Now that is a interesting question because we never know. And yeah, it's COVID challenged everyone.
Yeah.
It forced us to readjust. And I was just thinking about that because I know there was, you're already in the house, no one's coming around, or very few and far in between. So the people that you were connected with, did you guys meet virtually?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few good girlfriends that I have that I'm still connected to. We connect via Marco Polo.
Okay.
And I think that's really becoming a lifeline for us through this COVID situation, because we can't be in person, especially over the winter, because, we didn't want to be inside with each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow, that is because with COVID, I think people scramble around and things like that, and some people were able to adapt, and some people just kind of fell off, and so just like yourself, searching for the people that I was associated with, and I realized that some areas got really, really like out of control. Far as trying to reconnect with people and trying to adjust to the new technology and all of these things. And, now your support group, your family and things like that, do you still communicate with them? And
absolutely.
You guys still talk about it and everything else like that?
Talk about the accident or Michael's situation, or
because you still have to have some sort of joy in it, and I'm a firm believer that talking about it helps bring those moments to the forefront and gives you time to reflect and things like that. So I'm always curious, do you still share those moments now?
I do. I have a few girlfriends that I know I can trust if I just want to complain and vent about what's happening. And they know there's no way to fix it. I just need to hear them. Or I need them to hear me. Because sometimes this life is still really hard, and it still sucks, but I'm also just aware that I still choose it, because I love my partner and he's still the same inside and in his brain and in his heart. It's just, it gets really hard when, so I have a full-time practice and I'm writing a memoir and I'm creating a support group for therapists, which I'd love to talk about. So I've got all these coals in my fire. And then when, since COVID, as well as the past snowstorm we had, there's always I'm the backup at this point. Michael has a team of caregivers that he works with.
Okay.
So I actually don't do as much caregiving as I did in the beginning, which is great because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do my career and do my grief work and work with clients and write and do all these things. But sometimes they get sick. They don't show up. Their schedules change, something happens. So then I have to do everything. So.
Right. Now, talk a little bit about your support group that you're putting together.
Yeah, I'm really loving it. It is called Tending the Tenders.
Okay.
And so it's for psychotherapists or wellness practitioners. So I recently had somebody in there who was a coach and did yoga therapy and stuff. She's a yoga instructor. So she wasn't necessarily a therapist. So it's for anybody who's supporting others right now, especially at this time. And, I woke up, this was a few like maybe 6 months ago, I woke up at 4 a.m. and I was like, I couldn't go back to sleep because I had so much anxiety around the pandemic and supporting my clients and the anxiety that they're having and all of the stuff. And I couldn't go back to sleep. And I thought, I need support as a psychotherapist. Like, this is so much like and I think what's really challenging with COVID is that we're in it too. And not just COVID, like all the racial stuff that was happening and the violence and all of that stuff, like January 6th, like we're in it also as practitioners. So I woke up thinking, I want to create a support group for us, for people like me who are holding others, because we need support. And at the same time, so it's a dual purpose group. There's support for us. And so we hear each other with what's going on with our personal lives or our clients. And then the other half is I teach what helped me with my grief. So I'm giving them better tools for being with grief, because I've also learned recently that there was one person I knew who said, I'm totally afraid of grief. And she's a therapist. And if I think about my training that I got with grief, it was like a part of an afternoon in our like adult development class or something, like that's just not enough training. So I was like, I want to train other therapists how to be better with grief, and not just from a clinical model. So I talk a lot about doing grief ritual and befriending grief and not fixing grief. And it's not linear, the myths. So we try to break all of that.
Okay. I love that you said that you're not, you can't fix grief.
No.
There's no fixing it, and it's not linear. And so I think that those are really important for people to understand. And for people who are afraid of grief, I'm still trying to learn about that, like why, I guess for people who have experienced it,
right.
Grief is a part of our life.
Absolutely.
It helped mold us. It helped, we found tools, we found passion and purpose. And I love the fact that, you said it, you're a counselor and you need counseling as well. You need that support as well. And I think that's very, very important, because when we try to take on so much, it can become overwhelming, and without an outlet, we can get wrapped into the emotional side of it.
Absolutely.
And that can become very deadly in so many ways, because then we start to project, so to speak. And then we become no good to anyone. Now, I'm not a grief counselor, not yet, but I'm working on it. I'm working on getting that degree, man, because it's like yourself, it's like, I need someone too. And as a man, it's kind of hard to find another man to talk to. So I just kind of I kind of pick at people to try to get them, to kind of open up the door so I can dump it all on them.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have to trick my friends. They're like, no. And then we just direct the conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really, really important. So now when you talk about grief ritual, you want to explain that a little bit?
Sure. So I studied with Sabamfu, and I'm also studying with her. They used to be married. So her ex-husband is Malidoma Patrice Somé. So I'm also currently studying with him. But they both come from the Dagara tribe in West Africa, in Burkina Faso. And so she explained it over there. They're doing grief ritual all the time. Grief is part of their life. And there's always some grief ritual happening. And I remember when she taught, she came over here, I don't remember when, but early on, and she was, I think, in New York City in a women's bathroom, and she heard this woman sobbing in the stall next to her, those like those kind of sobs. Like, she was clearly not okay. And she came out of the stall, at Sabamfu being the lovely, generous person that she was like, turned to her and was like, "Are you okay?" And the woman was like, "I'm fine." And that's when Sabamfu was like, "Okay, I need to teach Westerners how to be with grief because they don't know how to do this. So then she started leading grief rituals for Westerners here in the States and I think in Europe as well. And she, this is a whole process in itself, but pretty much they bring in the elementals in the Daguerreotype tradition, which is fire, water, earth, mineral, and nature. In the grief ritual, you set up a grief altar. And then you also set up an ancestor altar. I was thinking of fire. So the color is red. You set up an ancestor altar and you're invited to bring pictures of your ancestors and place that on the altar with flowers. And there's always any kind of good ritual involves beauty and creating beauty of some kind.
Yes.
And bringing in the elements of nature into the space. And then she would also help us set up a forgiveness altar or reconciliation altar, which is connected to the water element. And then we would call in the elements and any of our guides and spirit guides or whatever. And then we would start and we would grieve. And there was a song that carried us. And if you weren't called to the grief altar, you were back in the village away from the altar and singing the song. And so it was this chant that she would drum and other people would drum and we would sing over and over and over until you were like, I'm done singing this song. But you would keep going. And we would do a few rounds of this with breaks for like eating. But she said, in Africa, there are no breaks. You would just have to go take care of yourself. But there was always, it would just keep going for days.
Yeah.
And what I really appreciated about it was that, she said you would go to the grief altar when you feel the grief. But a few people were like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, she's like, well, you can go if you feel sadness, if you feel rage, if you feel numb, if you feel nothing. If you feel joy, you can even bring that there, although that's more a place of being in the village because it's not associated with grief. But she was just saying you can show up with anything and give it to the grief altar,
right,
which essentially is food for our ancestors. The ancestors need to know that you miss them. And so your grief actually feeds them, which was a beautiful thing. And then another thing that was really powerful, and I remember having this distinct awareness around, I've done this before, but I don't know where. But when you go to the grief altar, so you go and then somebody from the community or the village goes and is right behind you.
Okay.
So you're never alone. You are not alone in your grief at the grief altar, which it just feels really important. Because I think we in the West are very good at isolating in our grief and not showing our grief. And over there, it's like, it's okay. Right. And if you're grieving, you have support because they're very aware you can't do this alone. We can't do this alone. No. So yeah, that's a little bit about the ritual. And I think I'm just having my own grief around the fact that we can't gather right now in person and do these rituals like we used to. I used to be a part of a group that would gather in Boulder, and we would lead these rituals on a quarterly basis. And I find it's really helpful to have that, like, because I would have a grief ritual and then I'd be good, and then I could kind of feel it kind of building up again. Okay. And kind of collecting. And I remember Sabamfu saying, it's good to have regularly scheduled grief rituals because you got to clean out the pipes of grief and keep the flow open, the flow of joy, the flow of life. Mm-hmm. And if you're clogged, you're not going to be open to that. And so we need to do this as a regular practice.
See, I love that. I do. I love that because I too have read up on African rituals, and it's amazing listening to you talk about it because, man, they move. And I used to learn about. I was learning about it when I was a kid through National Geographic, And never even understood why. But thinking about it, and I look in the books and you see these beautiful pictures, and they're dancing, they're moving, and you can't really see the video, but you can read the words, and your imagination can take you there. And I used to always think that was just, I thought it was just celebration rituals, which it turns out it was, but just in a different sort of celebration.
Yeah.
And and there was so much knowledge into it. And when you're a kid, you just want to see people in the magazines. You want to see the animals that have killed something. And, that was exciting. But looking back on it now, and I just go, life is funny that way. It is truly funny that way. And getting back to our ancestral roots, if I can say that correctly, but getting back to those ancestral roots and doing the studies that we've done, we see the similarities across the board. And you're right, we as Westerners, we need to learn how to move, because the grief has to move through your body.
Yeah.
And the more it's trapped. I've seen people get sick and not know why. I've seen people, we're good at isolation.
Yeah.
That's the main part, because we don't know how to talk.
Yeah.
We definitely don't know how to talk.
We don't know how to be with discomfort.
We don't.
And grief is very uncomfortable.
Yes.
One of my clients said it best. She said, grief is like having to wear a wool bodysuit that you can't take off. So it's like, if you put wool against your skin, it's like it itches, right? Right? You want to take it off and you can't. And Malidoma also said something like, grief is staying with the discomfort of life.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And here in the West, in the United States, we're not good at being uncomfortable.
No.
We want things to go right. We want to feel good. We want things to be fixable. We want linear stages. We want to know there's an end and we go back to what was normal. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to be with grief, why it's so hard for many people here to be with grief, because you don't go back to life as it was.
No.
And it's more about integrating your loss, letting it influence you. It's an alchemical process. Anyway, there's more I could say. I'm just fascinated too around why some people, like, I've often thought, like, why was I so resilient? How did I eventually learn how to thrive with this versus like some people I think turn to drugs and alcohol or other addictions, or they isolate, or they don't do as well.
No.
Yeah.
But I think that's what makes the work that you do so important, is to help them do well.
Yeah.
And start doing well. And you found ways to come across that, even though I know those questions are still there. But I look at you and I hear about the work that you're doing, and I've read about the work that you're doing. And I go, she's found a way to thrive. And this month, we've featured like women like yourself that have gone through it and found those ways to thrive, coming out the other side. Now, are you still, let's see. Well, I guess I'll ask a different question. Now, with your significant other, is his personality still there? He's still okay.
Oh yeah, that was as soon as he could talk after a few surgeries, and I won't go into the details of that, but he was still there. Okay. And we were grateful, because we were also like, does he also have a traumatic brain injury as well as a spinal cord injury? And it was just a spinal cord injury. So we were all very grateful for that.
Yeah. I was asking because sometimes when people go through major accidents like that, they're and rightfully so, they're never the same.
No.
And, I've met people who have gone through those accidents and are in wheelchairs, they're just they go into a depressive state.
Yeah.
And
And I think actually that just reminds me that when so we were in Longmont United Hospital for 45 days, and then he was transferred to a bed at Craig Hospital, which is in Denver, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And they only deal with two things: traumatic brain injury and spinal cord injury.
Okay.
And so we were there for 3 months, and he remembers seeing the other men, and it was mostly men. I think there was one woman who was injured, but it's mostly men because of men do more riskier things, I think, than women do, like outdoors related.
Yeah.
I think that's why there's a higher number of men who are injured with this than women. But he remembers seeing and trying to connect with the other men that were there at the hospital, and they just had like a blank look, like no affect, like they were stuck emotionally. And my partner is somebody who's very emotional, which I think is very untypical as a male to be that. I mean, I joke with him like he's more emotional than I am. He cries at TV programs and commercials and YouTube video. Like he lets it show and he lets it move through.
Right.
And I think he remembers being like, I don't want to be like them. I want to feel this, and I don't want it to let it also affect me in that way. I don't want to be numbed, and I don't want to be shut off and depressed from the world, because that's what he saw in the other people there. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Wow, that is such a common thing, and wow. I'm listening to you. I'm just going, wow, I can just listen to you talk all day long. I really could. And because you just take me there, and I just go, wow, I can't relate in a physical aspect, but walking through your life and these challenges and the stories of how you got to where you are right now, you just put me in this moment where I just have this heartwarming feeling, and I have this smile that wants to break through, because I go, there you go, that's badass right there, right?
Right.
and now, look at you now, you standing here with your head up high, and you're going, I got this. I got do you have those days where you're just like, I've seen a video with you one time where you walk around screaming down the street.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So what was going on with that?
Oh, I think that was 2 weeks ago, and I was just feeling really irritated.
Okay.
And I just kept noticing, like, I think my irritation at times is quicker, or like it comes out quicker, just small things. And then I was like, I need to go out and walk. I have a trail that I walk near my house, and I've become very bonded with this trail since the pandemic. It's actually one of my sports, and it's with nature. And so I was out, and I just started grunting, and I started like just emoting and just allowing it to go through. And I think that's another, that's what I learned from grief ritual. It was like, I need to be at the grief altar, and I need to grunt, and I need to growl. And I think I was teaching people how to like, like I feel like I'm pulling up the muck of grief in my lungs, because the grief, according to Chinese astrology, lives in the lungs and the large intestine. And so I was like trying to like move that up and out with those grunting, growling, moaning. I think we called it a grief groan. Somebody named it that, which is really important to emote and let it out. And I thought, well, I might as well capture this live and on person, because I think, one of my passions is I love to teach people how to be with this.
Right. Teach people how to move it through your body.
Yeah.
And I think we're still trying to get that through people. People do it subconsciously.
Right.
I believe. And because I've seen family members, that have lost people, and the first thing they do is go put on something Motown. And but the men, they put on Motown, they dance and everything. And I was going, where did you learn this from? But I think it was just a subconscious thing. It was because in our community, we just, I don't know, we danced, we sang songs, and, neighbors and stuff. When we do barbecues, people all over the place dancing, and I just never understood why.
Uh-huh.
And because I'm not much of a dancer. I'll be the first to tell you. I got 2 left feet, and you get me to dance, and I go into a zigzag circle.
Well, if you can walk, you can dance.
And
actually, even if you can't walk, you can still dance, to be honest.
Very true.
My partner still can dance.
Okay.
He's got his head movement. He does have some arm movement.
Okay.
And he's got a chair. If he's in his chair, he can roll around. Anyway, you can. So I believe you can dance, Tony.
I've had people tell me that, and I've proved them wrong every time. I have proved them wrong. So I don't go to clubs or anything because of that exact reason. I'm tall, and so I move, and I'm not very limbo and everything. So I'm tired of seeing people slide across the floor. So I just stay off of it. But if you put me up against the wall, girl, I'll move.
Okay.
I'm safe. I'm safe, but I love that music has always been a part of our lives, even though we've never really understood, but it has so many healing factors to it.
Yeah, it does.
It has so many healing factors to it.
Yeah.
Now, how can people get a hold of you?
Well, my website is now www.betherlander.com, or they can send me an email at beth@betherlander.com. My Instagram account is Beth Erlander Grief Friend. And I post about grief. In fact, right now I'm posting, I think I'm going to create a post today about being in the discomfort of life, and how we need to get better at that. And I'm starting to speak to people who are supporting the bereaved or somebody who's grieving, because we just need more. People need to know how to do this better. So
it's nice to socialize it.
Yeah. So those are the best ways: my website and my Instagram account. I'm on Facebook too, but I don't use it as much as Instagram. So
yeah. Now, if you had some encouraging words to tell someone that's in a similar situation as yourself, what would you tell them?
Good question. I would say find your closest peeps, your people, and keep them close. I would encourage them to have all their feelings and find a safe person to be with them with, or if they don't have anybody, to go out and be with a tree that they know, or put their feet on the ground. You're never alone. You always have the earth beneath you. And as much as possible to move your body, even if it's slowly, even if it's like you walk around the block or you walk up your stairs. Because I also remember being told, you should go to a yoga class and you should go for a walk. And, but in the beginning, that's really hard because grief is heavy. It makes your body heavy. So, maybe find a restorative yoga class where it's about getting in these poses and then you lay there and receive that. I did that in the beginning too. That was helpful. And if you're a journaler, you can start journaling. If you're not, then don't force it. And then I think also about with the movement and moving your emotions or your body is also just taking care of your body as best you can. It's also hard to eat in acute grief. So finding some kind of nourishing broth is really important. Eating good fats. Trying to get some nutrition. Hydrating is important. I would also add, I started taking a product called Remag, which is a magnesium product, because you need more nutrients, I think, when you're grieving. that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
And then trying to get rest. And if you can't, if you're not sleeping, just to allow yourself to rest and tell your body, like, no, this is time to just be horizontal, and we can't sleep, but we're going to just rest. We need to just not do anything. And if you need to take some sleep aids, you have to get some kind of sleep. Somebody in the beginning dropped off anonymously, one of my friends, and I don't know who to this day, some sleeping pills,
Okay. Oh yeah.
like Ambien, and said, Beth, you need to sleep. And I was hesitant, but I started taking it, and for a little bit, because if you're not sleeping, you're not able to do anything else.
Right. If you're not sleeping, you're not healing.
Yeah.
And I think that is truly important. And sometimes people just sleep a lot too.
That's true. Yeah.
It's hard, but sometimes the grief, like you said, is very, very heavy, and your mind just wants to shut down. It doesn't want to deal with it. And for some people, they fight it.
Yeah.
And and sometimes it turns out pretty good. Sometimes it don't, depending on the fight that you're going through in your mind.
Yeah.
And it can be a wicked little battle.
Yeah.
Grief is one of those things. It will adjust to you. It's not asking you to adjust to it. It will adjust to you. And I think the adjustment, there's a fine line.
Yeah.
There's a really fine line to where one end it can break off really, really bad. And the other end, it's a slow progress.
Yeah.
It's a true process to rediscovering who you truly are, because we're not the same people.
No,
we're not the same people when we start. And that takes a lot of growth, to not let it turn you bitter.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's, I would often say it's bittersweet. My life is bittersweet. It still is bittersweet. So learning to love the bitter and the sweet. And I'll also add, one more thing to the advice, or, what to do to take care of yourself in early grief is find somebody to help you. Work with Tony, work with me, find another grief coach, and, make sure that person has been through grief. I think it's important,
right,
to find somebody who speaks your same language of grief. And, we're out there as grief support practitioners. It's like, you don't have to do this journey all by yourself. I often see my work as like I'm farther along the path. But I was, it's like grief. You're dropped in the middle of the wilderness without provisions or a map, and you're just like, okay, what the hell? Where do I go?
Exactly.
And then you hire a grief practitioner to be like, all right, I've got some treats, some water, I've got a compass. I kind of know where we're going, but I don't, because it's your path. But I'll walk with you. Let's get you out of here.
Yeah, I definitely love that. Do you have any virtual events coming up, or are you slowly transitioning back into the in-person?
Good question. Well, right now I'm about to launch my third Tending the Tenders group that starts April 7th. So I'll be starting some social media posts about that and how to sign up soon. And then I am still a Zoom therapist only at this point in time. I actually just let go of my office right now, but I am seeing some people that are willing to meet me if they're local in person. We meet by my tree, or go for a walk on the trail that I just really love. So if you're willing to do that and be outside, I'm willing to meet you there. So
I may have to show up to one of your events, because I'm still looking for other tools. I'm still growing. We all still growing, and grief is not something that you're going to perfect. I mean, you can get really good at it, but grief is, I'm learning.
Yeah.
Wow, there's so many different variations.
Yes.
So many different variations, but the tools that we develop are pretty similar in some sense when we come down to the actual ritual aspect of it. Move, talk, community, stay connected, and allow yourself to move, feel, allow yourself to talk,
Mhm.
and don't be afraid to let your mind take you there, because there's healing in that when you allow yourself to just let your mind just go.
Yeah.
But you got to be careful too, because I've let my mind go a couple times, and found myself sitting on the couch holding my head, going, "Okay, I don't know what just happened."
Uh-huh.
Because you have those 5 minutes where your mind is gone, and then you come to and you're just going, "Okay, I don't." So I often find myself doing that as well.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Anything else that I just want to just pick your brain so much, and I know,
Right.
and I'm just going, 1,000 different questions, and I was going,
Right.
anything else that you would like to add?
Um, I don't know. I just am feeling like a lot of compassion for people out there who are dealing with this. And I think, I have this awareness right now that there's a lot more people grieving
Yeah.
because of the pandemic and because of everything we've gone through this last year. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just feeling tender and sad as I think about that, and I just wish people well, and I hope they find what they need and feel support in their grief out there in the world. And really, it's just coming back to I just have this vision of like all of us gathering in a circle someday and just like not showing up with words in the beginning when we can gather, and
Right.
just grieving and being near a fire or the water, and just looking into each other's eyes and seeing our faces and just like, wow, what was that? Like, I don't know. And just being with what just happened and supporting each other in community again.
So I love that, because I totally agree. I see it as well, except for I see me with the men.
Yes.
I see me with the men, and we're just sitting there and fishing and
Yeah.
doing activities, but also, just coming together and watching the men actually start to talk.
Which, Tony, I just want to say, I just appreciate you for doing the work you're doing with men,
Thank
because
you.
I think well, for me as a woman and as a white woman, it's harder to reach men for various reasons. But I'm so glad that you're doing this work because it's so important and it's so needed. So thanks for doing what you do.
Well, I want to say thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing more of it. Now, when does your memoir come out? That's one of the things I want to ask. When does your memoir come out?
I
Uh-huh.
have no idea. I'm still writing it. I've got about I think I'm up to 9 chapters. I forget the page count at this point. I'm in a memoir group, which is really awesome. It's with a woman who also she teaches memoir, grief memoir in particular, Tanya Pavacek.
Okay.
Um, and I'm in that until June. The goal was to have a finished manuscript, and I don't know if I'll have a finished one, but it'll be a lot farther along than it was if I didn't take the memoir group. Um, I would love to see it coming out in 2022. I think
Okay.
it's realistic.
Okay.
So
Well, I'm looking forward to that, and I'm also looking forward to attending at least one of your grief rituals, because you're not far
yes,
from me. I'm
and
in Loveland. You're in Boulder, right?
yeah, and I'm with there's a group of people that are starting to gather to talk about how to support when we can in person to do grief ritual on the land.
Okay.
Um, so I'll keep you informed of that for sure, because that'll be really key. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing something. I've always wanted to do something as far as a grief ritual. I've read
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
I've heard about it. I've
Yeah.
never truly experienced it, except for in my own way, I
Yeah.
guess. But I'm definitely looking forward to doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing you in person and
I know,
grieving with you, being able to support you.
and
At the
vice
grief level.
versa.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
and vice versa, because I'm gonna let everyone know your information would be in a link, and everything.
Great.
And I want to encourage people to get a hold of you and partake in your rituals, because you come out with a different perception of what your grief is like. And I can't say it from experience, but from knowledge.
Yeah.
Learn knowledge, and seeing the smiles on people's faces and things like that. I want to encourage people to get into that, because there's nothing else like reaching into your ancestral roots and actually understanding how you're designed, how you're created, and these beautiful things that have been lost over time, to bring them back to the forefront.
Yep.
Now, with that being said, I'm going to take us on out, and I want to thank you for being on this episode with us and sharing your journey, sharing your experiences and your expertise with us. I'm very humble. Thank you very, very much. And for those who are looking at this episode today, reach out to Beth and contact her and get signed up with some of her rituals.
Yeah.
Yeah. And until next time, you're welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. And, we could do this again.
Of course. Yeah. I want to learn more about the food thing,
I know.
We're going to have a part 2. You know this, right?
Okay. Cool.
Okay. We're going to talk about food and grief.
All right. That'd be great.
Yeah. There you go. We're going to do this. And we're just going to sit back and talk about how food affected our bodies as we're going through these things. So for everybody paying attention, stay tuned for part 2 with me and Beth. We're going to talk about these things, man, and learn something, get some good recipes. And until next time, enjoy your day, stay strong, and thank you for joining in another episode of Memories of Us.
Thanks again for listening to another inspiring episode of Memories of Us podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can stream on any of your popular podcast platforms like iHeartRadio, Player FM, or Pocket Cast. If you're looking for something different, check out Walking Talking Therapy. Memories of Us podcast has new episodes every Tuesday. Until next time, stay strong.